Pray with me. Holy One, guide these words. Infuse our hearts with you as we listen. Guide us to a new understanding. Amen. This is fast becoming one of my favorite stories in the Bible. The story of Zacchaeus climbing the tree and being called by name. There is so much there in the story. And the details are so rich that it's a sycamore tree that he climbs, and that he's a short man, and that he's a chief tax collector. I mean, it's just replete with details. And it's so easy to imagine it and see it happening. And there is so much in this story that is about the way that Jesus calls us into relationship and into accountability and into love. So where we are in the Gospel of Luke, which we've been hearing about kind of for a while, because that's the gospel that we're covering this lectionary year. This is toward the almost the end of Jesus' ministry in Galilee. And it's the chapter right before he turns toward Jerusalem and his final walk toward his death. So by this time in the story, Jesus has amassed lots of followers. There are crowds all around him everywhere he goes. People have abandoned their houses. They've left their fish nets. There's a ton of women who he saved who have been financially supporting his ministry, because how else do you think he got stuff done? He's got a lot of people who are around him and following him and who are really swept up in his message and are probably have changed their lives in response to his teachings. There are a lot of teachings out there already that he's offered. So this huge crowd has gathered and sort of follows him everywhere he goes. And Zacchaeus hears about this. I wanted to say a few words about what the importance is of Zacchaeus being a tax collector in this story. Because we've heard a lot about tax collectors in Luke. And that's because Luke talks a lot about tax collectors. Luke, in fact, talks a lot about wealth. He's very concerned about the ways in which we use money. He's very concerned about the unequal distribution of wealth in this society, and he's very concerned about equalizing that, about sharing out of abundance. And he preaches, in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus preaches over and over and over about money. And part of the reasons tax collectors come up so much is because they were sort of at the nucleus of this unequal system. So we have to remember that the Judeans were under occupation by the Romans. They were under forcible occupation. So just like Rey from Star Wars, on the island where she's a scavenger, and all of the other galaxies in the Empire who were under occupation of the Empire by threat and by force, so are the Judeans under occupation. They're under daily threat. And the way that they are funding their warmongering and their luxurious lifestyle, the Romans, is they take taxes from all of the people they occupy. They take a big, fat chunk. And the way they get that chunk from these poor farm workers and peasants is they engage with people from the community. So people Judeans who are part of the community, and they tell them, go collect taxes from your neighbors for us, and whatever else you want to collect is just fine by us, under our name. So tax collectors were from the community, and they went door to door extracting taxes for the Romans, and then any other little excise fee that they wanted to take was they just got a pass on. So not only were they betraying their community and pulling apart the fabric, they were also just really gouging them. And people were poor, and if you could not pay your taxes, you lost your land. And if you lost your land, you were driven into permanent poverty. So that's why Luke is so concerned about this and preaches over and over and over about it. And that's why tax collectors show up, because they are really doing harm to their community. They are betraying their community, and they are driving their neighbors into slavery and land debt, which you really couldn't get out of. So Zacchaeus is a chief tax collector, which I'm guessing is sort of like the pyramid schemes with Avon and Tupperware and all the rest, right? He extracted a little bit from all the way to the top. So he's got a lot of accounting to do. But he hears about this Jesus guy, and something about it, something about his teaching, something about, we don't really know what. We're not given that part of the story. Something in him compels him to go see Jesus. And he gets to this huge crowd, and because all of these crowds have now amassed around Jesus, he can't see. He's a short man, which my husband and I relate to that. I'm on a little step stool right now, so you can see me. So he can't see. That's what we're told. But I also have to wonder if he's uncomfortable in his community. If he has done so much harm that he doesn't feel like he belongs with them anymore. And so he climbs the tree to get some distance and kind of hide himself away from the community. You've been in a throng, right? We greeted each other this morning. You see each other. But he climbs this tree to kind of get out of the crowd. And from that place, he feels, my guess is, a little invisible. You've got these leaves covering him, and he can see everything below, but people aren't likely to look up. They're all looking at Jesus. He thinks, okay, I can see this man that everybody's been talking about. And Jesus stops right under the sycamore tree and looks directly up at him and sees Zacchaeus. And I just imagine that when that gaze hits, right? Have you ever just been doing your business and you look up and you lock eyes with somebody and you get this jolt of electricity almost, where this exchange of energy happens? I imagine that it must have been like that, only magnified 10, 100-fold. So he sees Zacchaeus, and then he doesn't just keep going and whatever transformation happened in that man happened. He calls him by name. So again, we're imagining this huge throng of people who have abandoned their livelihoods, who have spent their precious time and effort and money following Jesus, trying to live by these rules that he's been preaching about. But he calls Zacchaeus by name, this chief tax collector. I wonder if you have ever been seen or called by name unexpectedly in that way. Maybe it was for being in trouble. You think you're getting away with something in school and the teacher totally sees you and names you. Or you meet somebody who gets you, and they call you by your name, and they see you. There is a feeling of kind of being turned inside out when that happens, or has happened to me. There's a feeling of being vulnerable and held and exposed and comforted all at once. Zacchaeus calls him by name and then says, I'm coming to your house for dinner. We're going to escape this throng of crowds, and out of all of these people who have been following me, out of all of these folks who have changed their lives to follow me, I'm going to come to your house for dinner, and it's just going to be us in your household and my whole entourage, who you will also feed, by the way. But we're going to have this intimate time together, and we're going to talk, and we're going to talk about what you've been doing and how you're hurting your community. I just have to think that the other people who were following Jesus were like, where's my dinner? Where's my dinner invitation? I've turned my life upside down with you, and you're going to call this guy you're going to spend your last few days having dinner with. But yes, that was Jesus' way. So they're mad. And what we see next is that this being called by name, this revealing past his disguise, this transformation that Zacchaeus, that happens to Zacchaeus, It's not just an internal one. It didn't just happen inside. It's not just a spiritual exercise of salvation. Something happened on his inside, and then he changes his behavior. He's called to account for what he's done. He repents by offering, not retribution, what's that word? Restitution. Thank you. He makes it right. He makes it right. So we don't have Jesus in our midst necessarily in physical form to look at us and call us by name, to look past our disguises, to see straight into our hearts, but we do have each other. And while today is a day that we're celebrating Halloween and we're coming in costume, we all wear disguises of some sort in our lives. We all put on masks to hide. We climb trees to escape the press of the crowd and the intimacy of community. We put on a costume, an armor when we go out into the world, because we might fear that what we've done is not going to be acceptable, that we can't account for it, or because we think we're supposed to show up cheerful instead of depressed, or we have been led to believe that we're supposed to act a certain way and we don't feel that way inside. And what we can do for each other and in our lives is see past those disguises, those hiding places that we all erect. Call each other by our true names. Call each other down from the tree and into community, into the fabric of community life. And our church can be like a little practice sandlot for that. It's hard to do out in the world, but I wonder if our church community might be a place where it becomes safe to show our true selves beyond our disguises. May it be so. Amen.